Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining ADESA Group for our webinar series, SAP Options for Your Workforce Management. Today is Kronos Workforce Dimensions Day. In a moment, we will be joined by today's speaker, Harold Thyssen, but first I wanted to share a few things about our webinar. During the webinar, all attendee microphones are on mute. We will answer submitted questions at the end of the presentation, but if you have questions in the meantime, you may type them at any time in the questions box in the meeting control panel. You do not need to wait until the end to type your questions. If there is no time left to answer every question, we will reply to you via email. Also, this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be shared on our website adesagroup.com within 2 business days after the webinar ends. In today's presentation, we will gain insights into Kronos Dimensions. We'll get an overview of its capabilities and integration with SuccessFactors. As I said, we are joined by Harold Thyssen, Senior Pre-Sales from Kronos, so I don't want to keep you for long since he has all the details. Welcome, Harold, and thanks for joining. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce you to the Kronos platform, and thank you as an audience also for joining us. My name is Harold Thyssen. I'm part of the EMEA pre-sales team, ring-fenced to help driving success for our partners in the region, being SAP, ADESA, and some others, and introducing you to the Kronos Dimensions platform. You may have heard in the news in recent months that SAP has decided to adopt our Kronos solution as part of their solution extension program, and there is some important reasons for that, and that is the whole reason why we wanted to share those reasons with you today and introducing you to the solution. First of all, I guess we need to talk a little bit about the background, not so much about how this came about. You may know Kronos as an organization. We've been around for a little while, around 40 years, and we focus exclusively on workforce management, and that is a little more than just timekeeping, and sometimes that requires, I guess, a little further explanation, simply because SAP as an organization has branded our solution SAP Time Management by Kronos, and that is good because that really understands where the focus perhaps should lie. Having said that, having now worked together with the likes of ADESA and SAP for quite some time, the market has actually responded in a remarkable fashion beyond our expectation, and really made us aware that the timekeeping piece, although critically important, sometimes it is not the strategic focus. So to understand the scope of that dimension solution, here is a visual to understand that a little better. So it is not just timekeeping, it is every aspect of that workforce management process, that end-to-end process, which starts with an element of forecasting in terms of how busy will we be, how much manpower would I need to staff my unit. And this is sort of platform or industry independent in the sense that this works in manufacturing, healthcare, retail, finance, etc. So the manpower required to ultimately service your demand, service your business. An element of optimization in terms of right people, right place, right time, right? We all have that challenge, regardless of industry. Obviously, in terms of that timekeeping piece, an element of data collection, so punching in, punching out, as you may be doing today, obviously with the sole purpose of streamlining a payroll-related process, but also understanding how that execution of your schedule is actually working out in real time. Have things change? We plan for the future, and then sometimes unforeseen things happen, as if we're busier than anticipated, or the weather turns sour, and that has impact in terms of, well, perhaps volumes of business, or capacity, or whatever the case may be. So we're using that timekeeping piece not only to feed payroll, but obviously to monitor what is happening in real time during the execution of my schedule. But also, of course, we're dealing, well, in the timekeeping piece, we're dealing with punch information, we're dealing with payroll-related processes. So attendance, but also dealing with non-attendance, of course, in one platform. So the absence management piece, I'm going to introduce you to some of that in the next 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Mobile and tablet. I guess technology moves on and moves very quickly. We've moved with the times, and it is one of those drivers behind this session. We want to make you aware the world of possible. Where can we take our organization? How can we elevate our performance in a wider sense of the word? So delivering all that capability on the mobile and the tablet, because we want your frontline managers not to be stuck in an office. We want them on the floor, whatever that means. That means different things in your different organizations, in different industries. But we want them to be on the floor with their customers, with your customers, and with your teams. But ultimately, this would all perhaps be in vain, all that good stuff we're doing throughout that end-to-end process, if we haven't embedded analytics in that piece, because ultimately we aspire to one thing only, and that is, of course, streamlining process, streamlining technology, but much more helping you achieving your strategic objectives, being it growth, being it cost reduction. Ultimately, it is impacting performance in terms of labor cost, productivity, and managing compliance better. Now, this implies that it sort of stops here. As a matter of fact, that is really not the case. It is really a reiterative process. We started that journey here, but then using analytics and that real-time quality information to understand what is going on, and then take remedial action. Because if we don't do anything with that information, then ultimately it is all in vain. Now, this is, I guess, the Kronos application, the Kronos platform in isolation. But where it becomes really interesting for us, both as a vendor, SAP and Kronos, but certainly for our joint customers, is this picture in terms of how does that workforce management piece sits within our HCM cycle, employee life cycle, right? And that is a critical element of that. Now, from a technology perspective, this is not meant to be a technical one, but certainly fire questions when it comes to the integration piece. We have those standard connectors in place when it comes to taking in employee information from HR, SAP SuccessFactors HR into Kronos, and obviously at the back end feeding payroll. But there may be many more integration points, and we'll come back to that in a second. But the whole point is streamlining process into one seamless platform. So one platform managing the entire employee life cycle. Now, let me introduce you then finally to that Kronos Dimensions solution. So I'm going to do that from two different perspectives, from a manager's point of view and as well as from an employee point of view. We think that's critical because not only are we driving performance from a, let's say, a productivity, a profitability, etc. point of view, but also we're driving employee engagement. And that means making employees, your team members, an integral part of that end-to-end process we've just seen. So let me log on as my frontline manager. And what do I see? Well, ultimately, again, that focus is on driving performance. So I need quality information. I need quality management information to ultimately make informed decisions. And that workforce management piece, we haven't mentioned that explicitly. So that is important to realize. It's not just frontline operational tools. It touches on every aspect of our organization in terms of course, it is about HR. Simply because this is the frontline extension of our, well, where our policies, etc., and contracts of employment and all of that HR stuff are monitored and executed. Of course, it is about employment legislation, but it is also about finance. It is about improving that bottom line. It is about controlling costs better. Of course, it is about IT. There is ultimately a technical element to this, although we obviously deliver this software as a service, so in the cloud. So we're taking away a whole lot of normal routine stuff that you would normally worry about and go through as an on-premise customer. But lastly, it is about operations. So here's a first impression what that means from Mike's perspective. We have taken today as an example retail environments. The same applies to every single industry and vertical in that respect. We're all having those same struggles in terms of predicting the future, how busy we're going to be, what I need in terms of capacity, right people, right place, right time. Although the way we do things in these different industries is indeed very different. Those very same concepts are still the same in that respect. It also means that some of our customers, our Kronos customers, have these very different divisions within their own organization. In terms of some of our customers are indeed manufacturers, but they have retail divisions, they have logistics as well. And they all manage that workforce management component in that one platform. So not different standalone solutions for all of these different divisions. It is really one platform, does fit all. Recognizing, of course, that each of these different divisions and also these different geographies, because some of our customers are indeed global customers operating in 30, 40 countries, are indeed very, very different. Anyway, so what are we looking at here? Anything Michael needs to know from a workforce management perspective, and that means ultimately, well, give me the information I need perhaps to reduce labor costs associated with overtime, or labor cost reduction relating to perhaps an excess absenteeism for whatever reason. So give me better tools around that absence management policy that we have as an organization to help driving a reduction in that. Tell me where I'm spending my money, because, hey, ultimately, this is about you. I want to understand where I'm spending my money and where I should spend my money. Where am I overspending? Right? It is about my volumes, meaning very different things. So here in the middle, monitoring what is going on. We're making a prediction for the future in terms of how busy will we be, and then monitoring in real time what is happening, of course. So more integration points to being at point of sale systems, management, warehouse management solutions, etc. Whatever vertical you're in, hooking up the Kronos Dimensions platform to those systems requiring inputs for Kronos. But it is indeed about understanding what happens in that real time in terms of we put that schedule in place, we start to work that. So understanding where the deviations are, where is it not working out in terms of who is late, obviously important for payroll purposes, but more importantly sometimes who is not turning up in terms of work needs to be done. If my capacity is compromised, I need to find replacements quickly, but I need to be notified in the first place, right? So notification. So here on the right, a control center tells me what's going on in the business. As in somebody was late, somebody didn't turn up. I'll show you in a second how we deal with those. It is indeed executing those attendance policies on the front line in terms of stipulating a process we want our frontline managers to go through. So here in this case, the system making, or first of all, highlighting the fact that me or Mike as a manager need to take some action, and in this case, dealing with, in this case, Brendan's case of perhaps non-attendance or lateness or whatever the case may be. We'll have a quick look later on what that means. But it's guiding frontline managers through that process. It's also about, well, timekeeping and approvals, of course. So understanding where we are in that process. Ultimately, yes, we need to feed payroll, and we need to do that in a timely fashion. That means all our different managers on the front line, and some of you run very large estates and organizations. There is many of those, and all of those managers need to do their thing in a very timely fashion. So it's understanding who has not, who has done, but more importantly, who has not yet done their thing. We're running payroll on Tuesday. Make sure you've approved your time cut. Make sure you published your schedules, etc. But it's that central visibility of all those individual things that need to happen all in a timely fashion. So yes, it is standardization of process and making sure indeed we're using the tools that we provide our frontline managers. So providing those tools and being able to monitor, as in, what is the quality of these schedules? What is the number of exceptions our managers have to deal with? That those are indicators of, well, performance or non-performance. How can you help improving that? But it's using that data then to good effect, centralizing that and helping these units then to do better. Now, this obviously typically implies that punching in and punching out is perhaps a blue-collar environment. But those very same principles certainly apply also to white-collar, where in this case, as an example, we want to allocate time against projects. More and more, we as Kronos, we deal with verticals not new to us, but verticals who are exploring other parts of workforce management. And all of a sudden, we talk to financial institutions, insurance companies, etc., about productivity and how to optimize staff. And all of a sudden, that sort of organizations traditionally not looking at that sort of thing, asking the question as in, we have X thousand of employees in the building. What is it these people do? We know what they do, but How can we be more productive? How can we serve our customers better? So that element of customer service applies to every single vertical, and it still means, again, right people, right place, right time. This is not necessarily about cost cutting. This is about making sure that you as an organization, you deliver that customer experience that they are expecting. So lots of other things, I guess, here in terms of not only Kronos related or workforce management related information, but certainly also other things that are relevant to my frontline managers, being it the weather, being it access to, well, third-party systems like think time task management. I won't talk about that today, but that means that best of breeds like SAP SuccessFactors, Kronos, and others sort of have then indeed realized, let's work with best of breeds. Let's create that seamless experience, but let's recognize that we are standards, we are different vendors. We need to talk, we need to realize how to better combine those offerings to make it one seamless experience. But that means, again, those best of breeds, in this case, task management by think time, being also an integral part of that workforce management process. But also, indeed, direct access to SuccessFactors in this case. So providing access through Kronos to SuccessFactors as I do now. I haven't got single sign-on on my demonstration environment here, but you get the idea. To make that seamless is indeed critical. So all those different business systems you use today, that it is indeed from a end user perspective, a pretty slick one. Anyway, so let's work through that end-to-end process a little bit, because this is ultimately the output of all of those different steps that we perform in that end-to-end process, right? And that starts again with forecasting, understanding volumes, and in retail that means, well, volume sales in terms of revenue, customers coming through the door, and potentially purchasing our products. But say in financial institutions, it means insurance claims processed. In healthcare, it means patients volumes. In logistics, it means cases, pallets, whatever volumes constitutes. But that's really where it starts. And to give you that first impression about, well, what a schedule could look like, because even if we just do timekeeping, even if we just consider timekeeping to be our primary focus, we still need a schedule, right? Ultimately, we can't do effective timekeeping if we don't understand who was meant to work when, and perhaps where as well. So this is a first impression of what it can look like. Now, again, keeping in mind, this is a retail environment, so your schedules may look slightly different. The inputs into your schedule process may be slightly different, but ultimately, again, it is about, well, several things here. Driving employee engagement, obviously driving or improving customer service, improving productivity. So that means, well, that is complex, right? Because there's a lot that goes into that process. But ultimately, let's start very simply here on the left. This is my team. Information coming straight from Employee Central, so real-time updates. So Employee Central updates are made obviously by our HR team somewhere in our organization, and that information flows straight into Kronos. Updates to existing employees or termination from others. That again, automatic updates in that respect. But also together with other employee attributes in terms of, well, what is it they do? What is their role? What are their skill sets? What is their availability? Obviously, we know from Employee Central what contracts of employment and therefore what rules and HR policies are applicable to my team members. But all of that stuff, all that information comes in automatically to ultimately for our frontline managers to be able to focus on what is important to them and their teams. And well, that may well mean I need some very simple information in terms of, look, it's here's just some anecdotal information in terms of, oh, it's a quiet day in my store. It's going to be a mega busy day today. I'm pretty much ready for that. Look, there was roadworks going on, and tomorrow night we're doing a stock take. So just some information that may well be very useful for those involved with that planning process, and communicating that to the teams and others who are looking at this. But also simple things like celebrating the fact that your team members are with you for X number of years, or it's a birthday today, or indeed from a health and safety perspective, because that is an integral part of this. Indeed, first aiders, fire wardens, etc., whatever health and safety considerations there are from your perspective. But this also ultimately, well, deals with work, right? We're allocating our team members to work ultimately, but also dealing with, well, absence, planned absence here, of course. So we mentioned that absence management process. Later on, I'll show you what that means from an employee perspective. How does this get in there? Well, managers can do that. We perhaps perform that process on a piece of paper today. But ultimately, we like to again streamline that and do that in that one platform. So planned absences in that respect, but certainly also unplanned absences, because that's important, of course, well, for two considerations. We mentioned that already in terms of feeding payroll, of course, but also on obviously understanding how that impacts my schedule. Because all of a sudden, because of Kelly's absence today, it means the work allocated to her does not get done. And well, customers may be upset as an end result. Revenue may be compromised. Compliance may be compromised of some sort, right? So it's important that we get that notification and create awareness in real time and provide frontline managers with very simple tools to deal with that, either manually or fully automated. It doesn't matter how we address that, as long as that is obviously, again, addressed in a timely fashion. Now, ultimately, it is obviously the aspiration of working towards that, well, right people, right place, right time, right? And that's, well, difficult to judge from what we are looking at here, as in the question is this a good schedule? And I guess to help us judging that, we could do with some more information like this, for example, in terms of, tell me what that coverage is. If you understand in the retail context what the demand is, and let me sort of turn off the blue line for now. The blue line represents the scheduled shifts here at the top of my screen. So if we turn off that blue line, then we're left with this. And this is really the demand. So here on a quiet day on Monday, I need 3 people at a certain time. Whereas say here on a Saturday, it is pretty obvious that at a given moment in time, and in this case 3:15, I need 17 because we're mega busy, right? So the fluctuating headcount. Now this may well look very different from industry to industry or vertical to vertical. So to give you that comfortable feeling that we accommodate those different approaches, very different but similar look and feel in terms of here is my being at a healthcare environment, being it a shift-based environment, manufacturing, etc., where I have an early shift and I need 2 on the early shift, whereas here is a busier day, I need 3 people on the early shift. So shift-based approach. So whether we, as I showed you earlier, in a retail context, have fluctuating demand by even by 15 minutes, because that's a norm in retail. It may well be that in other parts of my retail organization, I have a very simplified shift-based approach in that respect. But let's go back to our previous picture. So demand and supply, but it ultimately means we want to understand where the demand comes from, right? So even if you just want to do timekeeping and simple scheduling, you still may have that ambition to indeed understand, are we overstaffed, are we understaffed? And obviously that revolves around a demand, right? That we need to create one way or the other. Now I'm going to show you the retail approach in that respect, but I guess in conjunction with the different approaches to scheduling, there's just different ways of going about that demand generation, going about understanding how busy we're going to be and how much manpower, how much capacity we need to satisfy that level of business. So let's come back to the schedule in a second. I want to understand and explain to you better where that red line comes from, right? And that lives here. So keeping in mind that some of these approaches to this particular element are indeed vertical specific, industry specific. Having said that, now we build these tool sets, these feature sets, sometimes with a particular vertical in mind. And then the very interesting thing is that some of our customers that in other verticals are becoming aware of the optimization opportunity and are actually questioning their own approach to how they do things today. As in, yes, we have always worked like this, and maybe it works. Perhaps being unaware of what the opportunity might be if we slightly change the way we approach some of these individual steps in that end-to-end process. Because ultimately, we all perform those same steps, right? But we do them in different ways. We do them sometimes on pieces of paper. We do that in Excel or on the back of an envelope. And ultimately, we want to streamline those processes and do those in one platform. Anyway, so this is where that end-to-end process really starts in terms of understanding from a volume perspective, and keeping in mind here on the left, I am in a retail environment where, in this case, footfall or customer traffic or sales, as in euro revenue or items, transactions, whatever the case may be, ultimately we want to understand what capacity do I need. So this means all of what you're looking at, by the way, is configurable. Every screen I showed you is configurable and tailored to your specific requirements in that respect. But this is where it starts. So are we in a logistics environment? It means understand number of pallets, number of cases, number of whatever items that need to be processed at any given time. Healthcare, patients volumes by acuity, etc. So very different, perhaps drivers, but ultimately the same principles apply. I have a volume and I need labor to service that volume. And here is that second piece. So we understand what those volumes are. And just for your information, we actually predict those volumes in a retail environment, as in we're looking at historic information and use that to good effect to perform trend analysis to predict the future. Using artificial intelligence in the process. We're not going to go into too much detail of that very process, but certainly if you are interested in that, very happy to have detailed discussions on that, because ultimately this is critical to get this right, because this is, again, that first step in an end-to-end process. If we get that wrong or not as accurate as we should have it, then it means we're constantly firefighting in the subsequent steps. So ultimately, here are those volumes again, here at the bottom, and it means we have then additional configuration, as in your productivity norms, to convert those volumes into, well, headcount or hours. So this means for this particular role being cashiering, I need this number of hours on these different days of the week, obviously very much in conjunction with, well, in this case, sales volumes or number of customers or whatever volumes it means. But obviously variable work in terms of variable being related to volume, and perhaps fixed work in terms of, look, I'm open for 12 hours a day on, well, these days here, and therefore I just have a fixed number of hours, a fixed requirement for a fixed role called duty management. So fixed roles, variable work, etc. All of that is configurable to cover your requirements. So what we're looking at here is that very red line. Now that red line that I showed you earlier in that schedule planner had a fluctuating headcount, right? By quarter hour we saw. So although it's a lot of detail, let me show you then where that comes from. Let's go to a particular busy day. We looked at a Saturday earlier, so at some point we needed, I think, 17 people in our store. Here is my different roles again at the top. And for each of those roles, we predict how much headcount we need here by quarter hour here on the left. And let me scroll down a little bit, and then you see those different headcount requirements, as in, look, at 2:30 I need 3 people doing merchandising. At 3 o'clock I need 10 people on the floor looking after our customers. So that is the level of detail that we can, if necessary, take into consideration when deriving that optimum labor forecast. So lots of detail in there, but all of this is black box. So this may sound complex or may even look complex. From an end user perspective, it is remarkably simple because we don't have to do anything in that respect. Your volumes coming in from whatever source system it is, or that may well be multiple source systems, that information just flows in. We number crunch it automatically, we produce those forecasts. And from a planning perspective, the only relevance for, well, a store manager or your frontline managers is, what is that red line? What does it look like? Have I got sufficient capacity to cover that work, really? Now, ultimately, yes, there is an element of well, planning required. We can do that in a variety of ways. We can have the system generating those schedules for us. Let's go to my front of house as part of my retail store, and it may well be we're using feature sets to indeed create that optimum schedule, because ultimately it is although simple at the surface, at a first impression, it is actually remarkably complex. Simply because, well, what goes into this is obviously that demand we looked at earlier on, but also HR policies, notoriously complex. Not so much the individual policies are not so much difficult or complex to understand, but certainly because there's so many of them, and that means company policy, working time directive, etc., etc. Employee availability goes into that, as in who can't work, who is not available, who prefers to work on Tuesdays versus who really can't work on Wednesdays. So all of that information is taken into consideration when system produces those schedules. Not just when the system does it; it is evaluated and assessed each time a planner or a store manager, in this case, makes a change to the schedule. And those interactions need to be simple. So let's assume, for argument's sake, we've generated that schedule. It is a pretty much optimized schedule, as we already knew, because this is the output that we already saw. But very simple interactions, and you know from experience, it needs to be simple, or else it's not going to stick. So we may be doing complicated things sometimes, but from an end user perspective, they need to be really, really simple. So simple things like let's swap to employees in that respect. So it means let me swap here Declan with Kelly. So very simple actions, as you can see, instant in that respect, but really meant to be on tablets and mobile devices. Again, we don't. The days are over that our frontline managers are sitting in offices behind desktops performing this sort of functions. We want them to be on the floor, not so much to perhaps create the schedule 4 weeks out. That is something that obviously can happen in the back office, but more importantly, dealing with those issues that require their attention in real time whilst they are doing other things like looking after customers, etc. Anyway, so that again, manual manipulation, really simple in that respect. Now, ultimately, we aspire to what? Three things really, and we mentioned those already, and certainly one of them, and that coverage. So this really is about the quality of that schedule in terms of have we covered our demand. So you see some slight overstaffing and understaffing, and we can express that in a numeric way as well. So pretty pictures may help us understand where it works and where it does not work, but certainly having this sort of information at every level of your organization. So what is the understaffing? What is the overstaffing? And how can we use that to really monitor how well these tools are used? Because ultimately, if we have a demand and, well, there is a not so good coverage, a compromised coverage with lots of over and understaffing, why is that? Because we don't want to leave that up to frontline managers necessarily to address that. Maybe they are not in a position to address that in terms of maybe it is the constraints of our policies, of our contracts of employment. Maybe we've defined contracts of employment such that there is only limited optimization possible, as in our contracts of employment stipulate the start and finish times of shifts on particular days. But it's with then the involvement of HR, understanding how we should go about aspiring and working towards higher levels of efficiencies and eliminating both under and overstaffing. Now, listen, we're very aware, of course, there's no such thing as a utopia of 100% productivity, but it would be very interesting to do an exercise with you, or perhaps you should ask yourself that question, as in, how efficient are we today? As in, what does this picture look like for your organization today? So without, I guess, sophisticated tools like volume and labor forecasting, and visualizations like this, it is actually remarkably difficult to understand. Perhaps you have different KPIs looking at your organization's performance. Maybe they're very good, maybe they're very informative, maybe they're a little limited. Let us help you understand what that picture, what your efficiency is like today. So two things, we looked at coverage as a measure of quality, but we're running a business, right? So ultimately we have a budget to work towards in terms of, look, I want to understand how many hours I'm scheduling. And it may well be variable because I have busy weeks, quiet weeks. I have peaks within the year, as in my Christmas period, across, well, obviously retail, but that means manufacturing as well, and that means logistics, etc. But I want to better understand what the projected cost is. So that's where those links are to timekeeping in that respect. Again, we punch in, we punch out, we feed payroll, but use those same pay policies we apply in that process to ultimately cost these schedules to make sure we stay within budget, right? Perhaps I have a a compromised capacity. Maybe I need overtime to cover my demands. How can I eliminate that? What choices should I make? What choices has the solution made on behalf of my managers? But again, it's controls around budgets, schedule costs, but obviously then monitoring in real time what is happening in terms of, again, using that timekeeping capability in terms of monitoring where I'm going, in terms of maybe I'm overspending, maybe I'm busy than anticipated, maybe I need some more hours. But it is, again, that 360 where we use that information on my dashboards to understand where things are going well. And to be honest, when things are going well, I don't need to know about it. Only tell me things that require my attention. So I'm overspending. Why am I overspending? Overtime. Why are you overspending on overtime? Well, because I have a high level of absence today, etc., etc. But it's making those correlations, and even go to the point where using artificial intelligence is making those predictions. And we can talk about it extensively, and I think we should, because it's one of those differentiators where we use artificial intelligence in a variety of ways. It starts with that forecasting, increasing that forecasting accuracy, but also automating some of these typically manager-based decision processes, as in an employee ask for time off, put a request in for a vacation, etc. How should we deal with, how should we best deal with that? In terms of today, traditionally we do that manually. In terms of, yes, approve or decline, what factors are taken into account? Well, how busy are we? How many of my team members are already planned to be off that day? But we can automate that to make sure that our frontline managers are focused on what we want them to focus on, manage their teams, because that's that's the reason why we hired them. So let's try, where possible, automate some of these mundane administrative important tasks, but taking away my manager's focus for more important things. Anyway, budgets. We talked about quality. We talked about costs. Make sure we stay within our budgets to ultimately make sure we achieve our financial goals as well. And that's where you see that link to HR. So finance having an integral stake, an integral part of this process. But also, of course, as a final point, compliance. Cost of non-compliance, as we all know, is high, and we have to avoid it at all times. So that means our internal policies, employment legislation, working time directive, and equivalents, being regulatory bodies imposing additional rules, perhaps around safety, etc., upon us, and that again makes it notoriously difficult for our frontline managers to execute on that, because again our financial aspirations, our health and safety considerations, and other policies may well sometimes be conflicting. How to best deal with that? So it's helping managers to monitor that compliance, really. So here's one example. Let's focus on one particular day, and I'm going to do something really silly, right? I'm going to create a really long shift, and then you see, by the way, that simple manipulation as in drag and drop, and ultimately illustrating the fact that these rules are monitored, and each time changes are made, anomalies or violations are highlighted to managers, and up to you as an organization to of course specify what your policies are, what your rules are, and how they should be applied. So different severities to these different kind of rules, to the point that in this case this manager would like to save and publish this schedule, and we simply won't let him, because as a corporate we put controls around that. We don't want you to do this, and it's not so much as a stick, but more as a tool for, listen, this is just making your life easier. You don't have to continue to be up to date with all of those difficult regulatory aspects of and HR aspects of the role. So anyway, quality, cost, and compliance. So I guess in a scheduling context, let's move on in terms of where were we? So we were walking through that end-to-end cycle. We looked at an element of forecasting, again, being it in a real context, predicting sales, or different ways we do that, again, in the different industries. Ultimately, our challenges are of a very similar nature in that respect. Now, let me log off for 1 second, because I want to very quickly highlight the fact how our team members as individuals can interact with the Kronos solution as well. So I've got a nice little application here that helps me mimicking my mobile device experience. So I'm going to log on as one of our team members to help you understand what that looks like. And it means my team members also have the dashboards, similar to what you saw earlier from Mike's perspective. So in this case, we're looking at Howard here, and Howard just imagine that Howard is arriving at work, and whilst he did so, he was actually on the phone talking to his friend, and they were trying to find a day to get together. In the process, Howard, in this case, totally forgot to punch in. Right, he was so preoccupied with the fact that's pretty exciting stuff, and the application on his mobile device is highlighting the fact, listen, I know you're at work, but you forgot to punch in. Do you want to punch in from here? And indeed, so you can do that from here, as simple as this. So you notice here the verification of the fact that Howard is actually in the building. He's at his place of work, so not just pretending he is, but very simple actions in that respect. Now, keeping in mind that Howard wanted to quickly check his schedule to make sure that he can actually take that time off. And it looks like this. It's a first impression in terms of, look, this is the information we share with our teams out there in a very controlled manner, of course. It tells me when I'm working. So I'm working here from, well, guess what? I work the late shifts. I know where I'm working in a particular store or particular unit, because ultimately that optimization piece may well mean, if that is practically feasible, I can work potentially in different stores or different locations or different units. It may well be I perform different tasks, as you see here as an example for Howard, as in today I'm doing this, tomorrow I'm doing something else, right? So checking his schedule, it also tells him, listen, there's open shifts, just in case you want an extra shift, then those options are available. So shift bidding, etc. So it means from a self-service perspective, a variety of actions that employees can perform to ultimately, again, drive their levels of engagement. It is critical for the organization's success. We all know that as a HR organization, of course, how employee engagement adversely or compromised employee engagement, how that compromises our performance. So taking care of my own availability, or perhaps even putting my own schedule together in a controlled manner, swapping shifts with my colleagues, whatever the case may be, it is providing those self-service functions, obviously, in this case, on a mobile device. But ultimately, it means checking quickly my balances to understand how much entitlement I have left, in this case for holiday, sufficient by the looks of it, and then ultimately requesting time off. Again, taking ownership of that work-life balance. A first impression in terms of what that self-service component may look like. So it really answers the question. In the schedule earlier, we looked at some planned absences. This is one way, indeed, of getting that information in there. It's not the only way to deliver that self-service component. Let's quickly touch on options available in that respect. So here is hardware that Kronos produces, and well, in-touch terminals. We this very week, it was our customer conference in Vegas. We introduced the updated version of this, so the in-touch DX in that respect, but using time and attendance terminals to, of course, capture that punch information, but also deliver those self-service functions. So what I just showed you on the mobile device, those same functions exist on these. So here's one option. This is the one we just looked at. But depending on your environment, it may well be you want to deliver that self-service component through a browser experience. Let's say in an Outlook environment where my project teams using other tools in their day-to-day business, in the day-to-day work, to perform their duties, but accessing Kronos in those same platforms. So it's not just we have to access Kronos through Kronos only. It is hooking up those, like I said earlier, those best of breeds to make that capability available in those different platforms. Anyway, so that's where we were. Let's go back in as Mike. We understand what that means from an employee perspective. And ultimately, it is almost coming full circle. But let's so have a quick look and get a first impression of what that means from a timekeeping perspective. So we have punch information. We know how we capture that mobile device, dedicated terminals or otherwise, and it's understanding where those deviations are. As in, I need to, as a manager, deal with some of these exceptions, lateness, non-attendance, etc. But consolidating that information in terms of what? In terms of monitoring my actual versus scheduled, in terms of, okay, this looks pretty okay, merchandising, but why is it we spend almost 8% more on customer service in terms of time and or money? As understanding where things are deviating from perhaps a norm, a productivity norm, or otherwise an expectation perhaps. Because ultimately what we don't want to do is use this as a review mirror in terms of looking back and concluding that, well, we've overspent. We want to do this in real time. So during the course of a period, during the course of the day, and take remedial action, right? So we want to impact the outcome. So that real-time aspect is critical in all we do. And that's where that timekeeping piece becomes so critically important. So here's one example of that timekeeping piece. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with that. You probably do similar things in whatever solution you are using. This is what it looks like in a Kronos context. In terms of three components here on the left, first of all, what was meant to happen. So this is the output of my scheduling process. You saw that earlier. So in this case, Brandon is working a week of early shifts by the looks of it, and then punch information. So in and out, recording those punches as they come in, obviously throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the periods. Periods, of course, user definable. And then obviously highlighting where there are anomalies in terms of, look, Brandon worked a shift while he was not planned to. Well, how to best deal with that? Well, the way we deal with that is rather simple, as in Mark has reviewed. But it may also be that this may require, from HR purposes, additional information in terms of a message to HR, as in yes, approved, blah blah blah, to ultimately make sure that all involved in that end-to-end process are aware of why some of these anomalies occurred and why they were justified and approved, right? So communications in that respect from division to division or department to department. Dealing with indeed lateness. So in this case, I was meant to start at 7, or Brandon was rather meant to start at 7, arrived late. How to deal with that? What are your policies? What is actually an exception in your organization? So all of those rules and policies are, of course, configurable and unique to you. Of course, being able to cross-charge. So you saw that earlier from a scheduling perspective. What I did not make clear is that those different colors you saw on my schedule was indeed representing different things, different jobs I'm doing during the course of my working week or working day. And I want to be able to cross-charge it automatically to the different cost centers. So we do that automatically, of course. So two components: what was meant to happen, punch information representing, of course, what actually happened, and then ultimately applying pay policies that automatically. So from a managerial point of view, the only thing that is required is dealing with those exceptions in a way I just did, as in, yes, I know because, well, why? Because the bus was late. How do I know? Well, because I've entered that as a comment here. But ultimately, again, the more important thing is in terms of applying those pay policies in real time to understand how I am performing against my, the expectation of budgets, etc. So hours being allocated to, particular pay codes or pay elements, whatever your terminology is. And let me just, for the illustration purposes only, deal with this missed punch. So I'm going to enter a time here, because ultimately that is a managerial task to be done on a preferably daily basis, perhaps even shift basis, in terms of dealing with missed punch, but applying those pay policies then. So look what happens here to this information as we reapply our pay policies in that respect. So you see those hours increasing and being allocated to the different pay codes or buckets in that respect. Being able to monitor how are we doing. Perhaps I have a budget for overtime. Perhaps I do not get a budget for overtime at all. Sometimes perhaps it's unavoidable. But again, it's finding those correlations, as in why am I incurring that, and tracing that back to, well, maybe I can prevent it, and where I cannot prevent it today, maybe I can prevent future occurrences in that respect. So I know there was a very quick introduction in the timekeeping piece. Those same principles are pretty straightforward in terms of the schedule, punch information, applying pay policies, and of course in the process maintaining those accrual balances, running balances for user definable buckets of time, running balances in that respect, and then coming full circle and then sort of finishing it up and looking at some of the questions you posed earlier. I'm not going to save some of my changes I've made. But again, coming full circle, because ultimately this is what it's all about, understanding where indeed thresholds are exceeded or where action is required. One more thing, perhaps from an attendance point of view, in terms of frontline execution from your of your attendance policies. Using that timekeeping information also to good effect in terms of dealing with, in this case, a managerial action highlighted by the system in terms of warning required, and automatically producing the documentation required for you as an organization to deal with these actions. So using that time and attendance information to good effect to, in this case, let me show you one example, Brendan's history in that respect, to use that information in, say, performance management. So individual employee performance management means, well, it means a lot of things in terms of productivity, but also attendance, or adherence to policy, or indeed health and safety requirements, etc. So having that history in there and using that to good effect to ultimately, not necessarily as a stick, but to use that to good effect to ultimately improve performance and influence behavior, right? So it's almost a 360 in that respect. Again, that analytics piece, an integral part of what we do, really helping understand what the status is of, in this case, my retail store, and what requires my attention to steer the outcome. So hopefully that was a good introduction. Sylvia, back to you.
Yes, thanks a lot, Harold. I think it was a great presentation. Now we have a good understanding, high level of what Kronos can do, which is great. Let's move quickly to the questions. We have some interesting questions that our technical team already answered through the chat. So one of these is, what integration method tool do you use to integrate with SuccessFactors Employee Central? Well, Kronos Dimensions is right now using Dell Boomi as the middleware, but it is also included in the roadmap to start using CPI, Cloud Platform Integration. Thanks for the question, very good one. There was another one. In regards to absences, are you able to upload documents, for example, doctor certificates? Another great question, and the answer is yes, absolutely, that's possible. So that's great. And we also have some others, for example, that were answered through the chat. For you, Harold, what are the main drivers why customers implement Kronos Dimensions?
That is a really good one, really. I guess it's summing up well, our session really, in terms of I guess our customers, your customers, really recognize the opportunity around what the best of breeds in terms of that one platform, that one united platform managing the entire employee lifecycle, what that can mean. Interestingly, some years ago, I have been in this space for quite some years, and years ago, I've never heard of that word, employee engagement. And nowadays, probably 90, even higher, 90+% of our initiatives around the region are driven by the ambition and the desire to improve employee engagement. So that is really one of the first reasons, really, it is a notoriously difficult labor market out there. You guys as employers, you are fully aware of that. So it is very difficult to attract the right caliber of individual, the right caliber of employee, let not alone retain the employee. So it means that employee engagement is a big driver behind all of this, that employee self-service. I guess that workforce management piece is that frontline extension of what you as a HR community already do so well in that HR piece and that payroll piece. But again, it is that scheduling and that timekeeping piece, and especially that self-service piece, becoming that frontline extension, enabling our teams and our employees to take to some degree control over their work-life balance. So employee engagement is one, of course, but then we still have those conflicting business aspirations, right? Profitability, productivity. We have to do more with less. It applies to all of us. And then that becomes notoriously difficult for frontline managers to execute on that, as in cut 5% or improve productivity by 5%. How do we do that? Where do we do that? So it is providing frontline management with those operational tools that help us achieve our more strategic goals. So without those, we're sort of completely in the dark. But also looking at perhaps performance measures that you don't look at today, because what are those measures? As in lagging KPIs like overtime percentage, absence percentage. They are informative in the sense giving us an idea of where things go wrong. But again, with then a platform like this, being able to understand where and why things go wrong, right? So maybe we can do something about it now, or certainly prevent future reoccurrence. So again, yeah, it's a long answer to your question. Improving employee engagement and indeed productivity, managing compliance better.
Okay, thanks, Harold. Very quickly, because we have 2 minutes left, one last question that just came in. So there's someone that has questions on the clocking out functionality. The question is, can overtime be added to a specific bucket? And can bonus to this time be added, like additional 25%? Can this bucket also be used to take additional absences? So if you can answer to this now very quickly, otherwise we will reply via email.
Obviously, I didn't quite understand the question, so let's take that offline and then.
Okay, perfect. Then let's close the questions, because we only have, as I said, 2 minutes, and then we will reply to the ones that were left offline. So just quickly, I wanted to remind you the next sessions that we will have. So next time we will have Employee Central Time, the following Theory, then the 5th of December Workforce Hour, and we will finalize with a conclusion the 12th. All right, so keep tuned. If you have more questions, you can get in touch either with me or Jose Maria at any time. And finally, I wanted to thank you all for coming. We will end the webinar now. Thank you all, and see you next week. Thanks, Harold, for your time and your great demo. Thanks a lot.
You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody.